Welcome to Ancient Relics Keeper, where lost truths, ancient mysteries, and forbidden history collide. Let's question the past and uncover what was never meant to be found. For millennia, it was just a mound in the Iraqi desert, mistaken for a natural hill. When excavated, it revealed a 4,000-year-old man-made mountain, the sacred heart of a civilization that invented writing, laws, and cities. In the desolate, sun-scorched plains of what is now southern Iraq, the past lies buried just beneath the surface. This is the land of ancient Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, the Fertile Crescent nourished by the Tigris and Euphrates. It was here that humanity took its first bold steps out of prehistory and into the light of civilization. Yet for millennia, one of its greatest monuments was lost to memory. So completely had it been reclaimed by the desert. It appeared as nothing more than a prominent, oddly shaped hill rising from the flat landscape, a feature local people called Tel el-Mukhayyar, the Mound of Pitch. It was a landmark, a place to be navigated around, but its true identity was forgotten, its colossal form mistaken for a work of nature. It would take the ambition of a new kind of explorer in the 20th century to peel back the layers of sand and time and reveal the man-made mountain sleeping beneath. The story of the Great Ziggurat of Ur is not just the story of a building. It is a dramatic cycle of creation, collapse, burial, and rebirth that mirrors the very fate of the civilization that imagined it into existence. The story of the ziggurat begins at the dawn of the 21st century BCE, a period of remarkable cultural and political revival, known as the Third Dynasty of Ur, or the Neo-Sumerian Empire. After a long period of fragmentation and foreign domination by the Akkadians and the Gutians, a powerful Sumerian king named Ur-Nammu rose to power. He was a unifier, a lawgiver, and a prodigious builder. He envisioned a new golden age for Sumer, and at the heart of his revitalized capital city of Ur, he commissioned a monument that would be the spiritual and physical embodiment of his new empire. This monument was the ziggurat, a massive terraced step pyramid dedicated to the patron deity of the city, Nana, the Sumerian god of the moon. The construction of the ziggurat was a statement of immense power, piety, and organizational skill. It was a project on a scale previously unseen. Ur-Nammu's vision was to build a literal mountain on the flat alluvial plain, a structure that would dominate the skyline for miles in every direction, a permanent physical link between the mortal world on earth and the divine realm of the gods in the heavens. The base of the structure alone was immense, measuring approximately 64 meters, 210 feet, in length by 45 meters, 148 feet, in width. It was intended to rise in a series of 3 massive terraces to a height of over 30 meters, nearly 100 feet, crowned at its summit by a sacred shrine, the Temple of Nana. This was a project that would require millions of bricks, a vast army of laborers, and a complex logistical network to supply materials. It was the Sumerian equivalent of a Moon Miss-Iona monumental national effort that marshaled the full resources of the state. Ur-Nammu did not live to see his great project completed. The work was continued and finished by his son and successor, Shulgi, who reigned for 48 years and brought the Neo-Sumerian Empire to its zenith. Under Shulgi, the ziggurat became the sacred heart of one of the most powerful and sophisticated empires of the ancient world. For the citizens of Ur, it was a constant looming presence, a symbol of their city's divine favor and their king's authority. From its summit, priests would conduct sacred rituals, and from the administrative buildings at its base, scribes would manage the vast economic empire of the city-state, recording tribute, rations, and trade on countless clay tablets. The ziggurat of Ur-Nammu and Shulgi was the center of their universe, a marvel of engineering and a beacon of their civilization. But no empire lasts forever. The great cycle of history turns for civilizations as it does for all things. Around 2000 BCE, after about a century of dominance, the Third Dynasty of Ur collapsed under the combined pressures of internal strife, environmental changes, and invasions from neighboring peoples, most notably the Elamites, who sacked the city of Ur. The great city was pillaged, its temples were desecrated, and its population was scattered. The ziggurat, while too massive to be destroyed, was likely damaged and stripped of its precious decorations. The shrine at its summit was almost certainly leveled. The fall of Ur was a traumatic event, lamented for centuries in Sumerian literature. In a famous poem, The Lament for Ur, the city's patron god Nana is depicted weeping over his desolate home. My house, which was in good order, has been brought to ruin. My city, which was in good order, has been brought to ruin. Over the next 14 centuries, the ziggurat experienced a long, slow decline. The city of Ur was periodically reoccupied, and subsequent rulers sometimes made efforts to restore its former glory. Most notably, in the 6th century BCE, King Nabonidus, the last king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, undertook a significant restoration project. Nabonidus, an antiquarian with a deep reverence for Mesopotamia's ancient past, tried to rebuild the ziggurat to what he believed was its original 7-tiered design. However, his restorations, built upon the crumbling 1,500-year-old core, were not as durable as the original work. After the fall of the Babylonian Empire to the Persians under Cyrus the Great, the city of Ur and its ziggurat entered their final terminal decline. The intricate canal systems that irrigated the surrounding plains fell into disrepair, and the climate became more arid. The Euphrates River shifted its course, leaving the city stranded far from the vital waterway. Ur was gradually abandoned, left to the wind and the sand. This is where the second phase of the ziggurat's life cycle began, its long burial. The process was slow and relentless. The outer protective layer of durable, baked bricks, a valuable building material, was likely stripped away over time by scavengers. This exposed the ziggurat's massive inner core, which was made of millions of simple sun-dried mud bricks. These unfired bricks, when exposed to the infrequent but powerful winter rains, began to dissolve. The structure slumped, its sharp lines softening. The wind, sweeping across the desert plains for centuries, carried with it a constant stream of sand and dust. This silt settled in the cracks and crevices, piling up against the structure's sloped walls. Slowly, inexorably, the desert began to reclaim its own. The monumental staircases vanished beneath the encroaching dunes. The lower terraces disappeared, and the entire structure gradually sank beneath a growing mound of earth. Over the course of 2.5 millennia, the man-made mountain was transformed back into what it had first appeared to be, a natural hill, the Tel el-Mukayyar. Its identity was erased, its human origin completely forgotten, remembered only in the obscure references of ancient texts like the Bible's mention of Ur of the Chaldees. The final chapter of the ziggurat's story is its return to light, a dramatic rediscovery in the modern era. The age of archaeology had dawned, and the 19th and early 20th centuries saw a surge of Western interest in the ancient Near East. The first proper archaeological investigations at Ur were conducted in the 1850s, but it was not until the 1920s that a full-scale, systematic excavation began. This expedition was a joint venture between the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania, led by the brilliant and charismatic British archaeologist, Sir Leonard Woolley. Woolley arrived at the site of Ur in 1922 and immediately focused his attention on the Great Mound, the Tell. He recognized that its shape was too regular, its slopes too uniform to be entirely natural. He suspected it was the site of the city's ziggurat, mentioned in ancient inscriptions. He put a large team of local workmen to the task of clearing away the sand and debris that had accumulated over 2,500 years. It was a monumental undertaking. As his teams dug deeper, the true nature of the mound was revealed. The first discovery was the hard, baked brick of the outer casing. Then, as they cleared the sloping sides, a truly breathtaking sight emerged from the sand. 3 massive converging staircases, each with 100 steps, rising up the face of the first terrace. They had found the grand entrance to the ziggurat. Woolley's excavation, which continued until 1934, was a triumph. He and his team painstakingly unearthed the entire base of the ziggurat, revealing its precise dimensions and construction techniques. They uncovered the administrative buildings at its feet and most famously excavated the royal tombs of Ur, with their spectacular and grisly treasures. But it was the re-emergence of the ziggurat itself that was his most monumental achievement. He had, in a very real sense, rescued the building from the earth. His work brought the ziggurat of Ur back into human history, transforming it from a forgotten mound into an icon of ancient Mesopotamia. The cycle was complete. The structure that was born from an empire, fell with it, and was buried by the desert, had been reborn into the modern world, a silent, powerful testament to the dawn of civilization. When standing before the immense, weathered facade of the great ziggurat of Ur, the immediate impression is one of overwhelming scale and religious purpose. It is easy to view it simply as a temple platform, a massive stage for sacred rituals. However, to reduce the ziggurat to a single function is to misunderstand its central role in Sumerian society. This was not just a place of worship. It was the vibrant, multifunctional heart of the entire city-state. The ziggurat of Ur was a complex organism that served as the spiritual, economic, and possibly even the scientific core of Mesopotamian life. Decoding its purpose requires us to look beyond the bricks and mortar and see it as the Sumerians did. A living institution that integrated every major aspect of their civilization. The primary and most profound purpose of the ziggurat was undoubtedly religious. It was, in its very essence, a sacred ladder, a physical connection point designed to bridge the vast chasm between the terrestrial world of mortals and the celestial realm of the gods. Sumerian religion was deeply rooted in the natural world. Their gods were powerful, often capricious cosmic forces who resided in the heavens. For a city to prosper, it needed the favor of its patron deity. The patron god of Ur was Nana, the god of the moon, one of the most important deities in the Sumerian pantheon. The ziggurat was his earthly home, a man-made mountain built on the flat river plain to give him a fitting place to descend and dwell among his people. The tiered structure of the ziggurat is central to this religious symbolism. Each level brought one closer to the heavens. The journey up the monument's 3 massive staircases was a symbolic ascent, a transition from the profane, everyday world of the city below to the sacred space at the summit. At the very top of the 3rd terrace stood a small, exclusive shrine or temple. This was the most sacred space in the entire city, the literal waiting room for the god. It was here, the Sumerians believed, that Nana would manifest, descending from the heavens to meet with the high priest or priestess. The rituals conducted in this summit temple were likely private and mysterious, accessible only to the highest echelons of the priesthood and perhaps the king himself. This function as a divine meeting point made the ziggurat the spiritual axis of the city. All religious life revolved around it. Processions would move towards it, prayers would be directed to it, and the city's well-being was believed to depend entirely on the successful communion between God and man that took place at its peak. It was a tangible expression of their cosmology, a monumental piece of architecture designed to facilitate a relationship with the divine. While its spiritual significance was paramount, the ziggurat complex was also the undisputed administrative and economic heart of Ur. The Sumerians were not just pious. They were intensely practical and bureaucratic. They invented writing not to compose epic poetry, but to keep track of Gusto record rations, inventory livestock, and document trade. The vast complex of buildings that surrounded the base of the ziggurat was the engine room of the city's economy. This sprawling courtyard contained the central storehouses of the state. Here, the immense agricultural surplus of the fertile Mesopotamian plains, barley, wheat, dates, and sesame oil was collected as taxes, carefully recorded by scribes, and stored in granaries. This centralized control of food was the ultimate source of the state's power. It allowed the government to fund the army, pay the bureaucracy, and commission massive public works projects like the ziggurat itself. The area was also a bustling hub of industry. Within the sacred precinct were workshops for artisans who produced the goods needed by the temple and the state. Weavers created textiles, metalsmiths forged tools and weapons, and potters produced ceramics for both ritual and daily use. All of this activity was meticulously documented. Archaeologists excavating the area around the ziggurat have unearthed thousands of cuneiform tablets. These are not grand royal inscriptions but the mundane, everyday records of a complex economy: receipts for goats, lists of workers' beer rations, contracts for the sale of land, and inventories of the temple treasury. These tablets reveal that the ziggurat complex functioned like a combination of a central bank, a federal reserve, and a national treasury. It was from here that the state redistributed wealth, managed its resources, and organized its labor force. The priests who ran the ziggurat were not just spiritual leaders. They were powerful economic administrators, the CEOs of a massive temple-run corporation. The sacred and the secular were completely intertwined. The offerings brought to the god Nana were the same goods that fueled the economy of Ur. Beyond its clear religious and economic functions, a more speculative but intriguing theory suggests the ziggurat also served as a celestial observatory. The Sumerians, and their successors the Babylonians, were keen and systematic observers of the night sky. For them, the movements of the moon, planets, and stars were not random. They were divine omens, messages from the gods that could foretell floods, famines, or the fate of kings. Astronomy and astrology were inextricably linked, and were considered a vital science for the survival of the state. The ziggurat was ideally suited for this purpose. First, its sheer height provided an unparalleled viewing platform. By ascending to the upper terraces, priests could escape the dust and haze of the city below, gaining a clear, unobstructed view of the horizon in all directions. This would have been essential for accurately tracking the rising and setting of celestial bodies. Second, the structure itself was built with remarkable astronomical precision. The corners of the ziggurat are oriented almost perfectly to the 4 cardinal points of the compass: north, south, east, and west. This deliberate orientation strongly suggests that the building was designed to align with the cosmos. It was not just placed on the land, it was integrated into the celestial map. From the high terraces, priest astronomers could have performed several critical functions. They would have tracked the phases of the moon, which was particularly important given that the ziggurat was dedicated to the moon god Nana. This tracking was the basis for the Sumerian calendar, which was a lunar solar calendar that required careful management to keep it aligned with the seasons. They would have observed the movements of the visible planets, which they saw as manifestations of other gods, interpreting their paths as divine portents. This information would have been crucial for the king, helping him decide the most auspicious times to wage war, build a temple, or perform a religious festival. While there is no definitive textual proof that the shrine at the top functioned exclusively as an observatory, the combination of the structure's height, its precise orientation, and the deep cultural importance of celestial divination makes a strong circumstantial case. The ziggurat was likely a place where the sacred met the scientific, where priests looked to the heavens not only with piety, but with the keen eye of an astronomer, seeking to understand the cosmos and thereby secure their place within it. The ziggurat of Ur, therefore, was far more than a pile of bricks. It was a microcosm of the Sumerian world, a single monumental structure that unified their faith in the gods, their command of a complex economy, and their scientific curiosity about the heavens. The Great Ziggurat of Ur stands today as a powerful and enduring monument, not just to the ambition of its builders, but to their profound engineering genius. Its construction, undertaken more than 4,000 years ago, represents a triumph of human ingenuity over a challenging natural environment. The Sumerians did not have the vast stone quarries of the Egyptians or the marble of the Greeks. They lived on a flat alluvial plain, a land of mud and reeds. Yet from these humble materials, they conceived and built a structure of such immense scale and durability that its core has survived for 4 millennia. A technical analysis of the ziggurat reveals a series of sophisticated and deliberate engineering choices that ensured its stability and longevity, showcasing a deep, practical understanding of materials science and structural mechanics. The foundation of Sumerian engineering genius lies in their mastery of the most abundant local resource, mud. The core of the ziggurat is composed of millions of simple, sun-dried mud bricks. This was the standard building material for everything in Mesopotamia, from humble homes to royal palaces. These bricks were easy to produce. Clay was dug from the riverbanks, mixed with straw or reeds as a binding agent, pressed into rectangular wooden molds, and then left to bake hard in the intense summer sun. For the vast inner core of the ziggurat, this was a perfect, cost-effective solution. However, the Sumerians knew that sun-dried brick had a critical weakness. It was vulnerable to water. The infrequent but torrential winter rains of Mesopotamia could turn a mud brick structure back into a pile of mud over time. To solve this problem, they developed a brilliant and resource-intensive outer shell. The entire ziggurat was encased in a thick protective layer, several meters deep, made of kiln-fired bricks. This was a significant technological step up. These bricks were fired in ovens at high temperatures, a process that transformed the clay into a much harder, more durable, and water-resistant ceramic material. Firing millions of bricks required a massive amount of fuel, likely reeds or imported wood, and a highly organized industrial operation. This outer casing acted like a permanent raincoat, shielding the vulnerable mud brick core from the elements. The genius of their materials science did not stop there. To bind these baked bricks together, they used bitumen, a naturally occurring asphalt or pitch. Southern Mesopotamia is rich in natural petroleum seeps, and this sticky, black, waterproof substance was the perfect mortar. It acted as both a powerful adhesive and a sealant, preventing moisture from penetrating the joints between the bricks. The combination of a soft, flexible mud brick core and a hard, waterproof, bitumen-sealed outer shell created a composite structure of remarkable resilience. It was a sophisticated solution, perfectly adapted to the available resources and the environmental challenges of the region. Beyond their choice of materials, the Sumerian builders incorporated several brilliant architectural innovations into the ziggurat's design to ensure its structural integrity. The most obvious of these is the use of battered or sloped walls. The walls of each terrace do not rise vertically, they slope inwards at a slight angle. This was a deliberate choice with a dual purpose. Structurally, the inward slope provided immense stability. It channeled the massive weight of the structure downwards and inwards towards its solid core, reducing the outward pressure on the facing walls and making the entire building far more resistant to slump and collapse. A vertical wall of this height would have been much more likely to buckle under its own weight. Aesthetically, the battered walls created a powerful optical illusion. By making the base of the structure wider than its top, they created a false perspective that made the ziggurat appear even taller and more monumental than it actually was, enhancing its visual power as it soared towards the sky. Even more subtle, but arguably more critical to the ziggurat's long-term survival, was the inclusion of what archaeologists call weeper holes. As Sir Leonard Woolley's teams cleared the sand from the ziggurat's facade, they noticed thousands of small, square holes about the size of one brick, set at regular intervals into the baked brick walls. At first, their purpose was a mystery. Some thought they may have held wooden poles for decoration or scaffolding, but Woolley soon realized their true ingenious function. The ziggurat was built as a solid mass, but the mud brick core would have contained a significant amount of moisture when it was first built. Over time, as more courses were added, this trapped water would need to escape. Without an exit, the pressure from evaporating water vapor inside the core could build up, causing the outer casing to crack and bulge outwards, leading to structural failure. The weeper holes were a simple but brilliant ventilation system. They allowed the moisture from the inner mud brick core to slowly evaporate out into the dry desert air, effectively allowing the massive structure to breathe. This process, known as transpiration, relieved the internal pressure and allowed the core to settle and dry evenly over a period of decades, ensuring the stability of the entire mountain of brick. The inclusion of this feature demonstrates a profound, long-term understanding of how building materials behave over time. The Sumerians were not just building for their own lifetime. They were building for eternity, and they engineered solutions to problems that would only manifest decades or centuries after the construction was complete. Finally, the very existence of the ziggurat is a testament to the incredible human and logistical scale of the Sumerian state. The construction of this monument was a massive public works project that required a level of organization and centralized control that is staggering for the 3rd millennium BCE. Consider the logistics of the bricks alone. It has been estimated that the core contains tens of millions of mud bricks, and the outer casing several million more baked bricks. Each one of these had to be manufactured, dried or fired, transported to the construction site, and lifted into place by human labor. This would have required a vast army of workers, brick makers, kiln operators, and laborers, all of whom needed to be housed, fed, and paid, likely with rations of barley and beer distributed by the temple bureaucracy. The project would have also required a complex supply chain. While clay was abundant, the fuel for the kilns and the bitumen for the mortar may have had to be transported from other parts of the empire. Supervising this immense workforce would have been a team of architects, engineers, and overseers who understood the master plan and could ensure quality control. The entire operation is physical proof of a powerful, mature, and highly organized government. It shows a society with a clear social hierarchy, a division of labor, and the ability to mobilize and manage its population for a common goal. The Great Ziggurat of Ur is more than just a building. It is a fossilized record of the Sumerian administrative system. Its construction demonstrates that 4,000 years ago, this civilization had mastered not only the technical challenges of engineering, but also the complex social engineering required to manage a project of such colossal human scale. Partially reconstructed in the 20th century, the Ziggurat of Ur has survived modern wars, its ancient structure scarred by bullet holes. It stands today as a resilient link to humanity's first cities, its original purpose still not fully understood. Thanks for exploring with Ancient Relics Keeper. Stay curious, question everything, and remember the truth is often buried deeper than we think.